Day after day, carbon emissions are being pumped into our atmosphere. From our cars to the factories that produce our goods and the airplanes that take us across the world. We are releasing CO2 at unprecedented rates.
For the last 200 years, the oceans have soaked up about 1/3 of the excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
At a glimpse, our oceans absorbing CO2 may seem like a benefit, but it causes a hidden issue under our waters, known as ocean acidification.
Carbon dioxide enters seawater. Like I was just saying, it's very soluble in seawater, and when it enters seawater, it binds with a water molecule and becomes a weak acid. We call that carbonic acid. And so that actually subtly shifts the pH of seawater. And when I say subtle, I mean like we might have seen like a 0.1 or a 0.2 shift in seawater pH over the last 50 years due to this process.
Although these changes may seem small, it poses a large threat to the marine life in our oceans, which will ultimately have adverse effects on our economy and communities.
When you think about an organism like a coral reef, or even some things that we like to eat, like clams, mussels, and oysters, they all have that hard shell that's like protecting the organism's body. And that shell is made up of what we call calcium carbonate. So it's the organism, whether it's a coral or a mussel or an oyster or a clam, is actually pulling a calcium ion and a carbonate ion out of seawater and actually making that hard part.
They form a calcium carbonate skeleton. And as you add CO2 to the oceans, the chemistry reaction with water to release a hydrogen ion also depletes carbonate ion.
They would grow their shells smaller or thinner or weaker because they can't find those building blocks very effectively. We were like, wow, they make a smaller shell. They're going to be, all of these things are going to be more susceptible to like a predator or a crashing wave because fundamentally their shells are weaker and smaller.
With a decline in these different types of shellfish, it poses a major threat to the biodiversity of our oceans. However, these issues linked to ocean acidification do not end, even above the water.
Along our coast, along the coast of Washington, Oregon, California, many of the smaller communities on the outer coast are highly dependent on these fisheries. And their primarily source of income is through the fishing that they do in the coast. And so they're directly impacted. And, it's a very significant impact.
There was definitely a noticeable impact. Oyster production was off because there's sort of a delay there because most of the oyster crops we grow take anywhere from 1.5 years to 3 or 4 years to grow. So kind of that impact got spread out over time.
Additionally, there are billions of people who rely on seafood as their primary protein source. A reduction in the availability of these shellfish increases prices and may threaten citizens of developing regions.
We actually eat quite a bit of protein from the sea, and ocean acidification has the potential to have a big impact on that.
These impacts of ocean acidification are not just limited to smaller communities. We are already starting to see the ripple effects in processing plants, restaurants, and even tourism, which is leading to a decline in the global economy.
Our nation's coastal communities are dependent on the health of our oceans. A NOAA study found there were 149,000 ocean-dependent businesses in the United States who employ more than 3 million people.
When the ocean is changing, how does that connect to sort of income that people have along the coast, the economy of California, the economies around the world?
The effects of ocean acidification, if left unaddressed, will not only continue to harm our oceans, but it will also jeopardize our economy and the livelihoods of millions of people. There are solutions, and it starts with reducing our
carbon dioxide,
CO2 emissions,
carbon dioxide.
However, with additional support from the president, we will be able to use more complex yet effective solutions.
In the water around the seagrass, what you will actually find is that there will be lower amounts of carbon dioxide inside that seagrass meadow because it is actively removing it from the water.
These examples demonstrate what is possible when we invest in science and research to help coastal communities adapt to the climate crisis.
Although these solutions come at a cost, the cost of doing nothing will be much greater. I urge the President to support projects combating ocean acidification and to pass stricter laws on CO2 emissions, because when action is taken, we are not only ensuring a better future for our oceans, but a better future for all of us.
There is no point that's like too late